we've got this rich history of all of our tickets, all of our knowledge database. We've got this peering infrastructure with all of the routing information, and also, we're taking sort of LLMs to then say, well, how do we create new ways of working that is, it's automation, but it's also enhanced with these new type of toolings. And I think we're going to see that across the industry, and you'll have machines making decisions on rerouting.
Welcome to Bits, Bytes, and Beyond, the podcast that takes you beyond the buzzwords and deep into the real-world challenges of moving your data. I'm Trent Blakely, Head of Product Marketing at PCCW Global Console Connect. In each episode, we'll unpack a specific technical subject, break down what's really going on, and explore how to solve it. Whether you're a CIO, a network engineer, or simply the person who always gets asked, is it the network? Then you're in the right place. This isn't thought leadership, it's technical leadership. Now let's get into it. Today my guest is Richard Petrie from LINX. He is the CTO and Executive Director there, based in London. Richard, do you want to introduce yourself a bit?
Thanks, Trent. Yeah, hi there. Yeah, as I say, Richard Petrie. I'm the CTO here at LINX. I've been here for 10 years now, involved in everything to do with peering and interconnection at LINX. And my role is on the technical side and looking at how we build out not just the internet connection platform, but all of the tools that go along with that to make sure it stays up and healthy.
Fantastic. Yeah, so today's episode is going to be about peering. Um, you know, to introduce and set the stage here, for many new entrants to this space, whether you're an ISP or just a regional operator or even enterprise networks investing in peering, it can feel like a bit of a leap of faith to do so. The commercial value sometimes isn't immediately clear when you're coming from that situation, and especially in markets where transit is very cheap, or where peering ecosystems are still maturing. But I mean, we see this a lot with our customers that peering really has evolved over the past 10, 20 years. It's no longer just about, reducing your transit bills. It's about better control, more resilience, sovereignty, and performance. So the challenge can be knowing where and how to peer in a world shaped by cloud and CDNs and lots of network automation. So I guess, Richard, my first question to you would be, how has sort of the definition of peering and the role of peering, how have they evolved over the past decade?
Yeah, thanks for that introduction. It's very, very relevant. If we look back maybe 10 years ago, when we were seeing the content networks really driving the agenda, and it was really about how do we get the content as cheaply over the internet and out to the end eyeball networks, the consumers, as quickly as possible and as cheaply as possible. So technically, the internet infrastructure was fantastic. It was a way that the content networks could come to a hub and spoke, which architecturally that's really what an IX is. It just brings a lot of networks together, and to deliver that. Now, obviously, times have changed, and dynamics have changed. Transit, as you mentioned in the introduction, transit has come down. So it's not just really, it's not so much about just the bills. Can we get it cheaper and can we get it to the end networks? And we see, as applications evolve and we work out, well, what's the sort of round trip delay that these applications need to have to function, we start to see how peering has evolved. And so now we're looking at peering as, or we see at LINX, and what I see is it's more about, well, how can we add a resilience play to the whole ecosystem? You mentioned sovereignty, so we're getting more and more pressure, not just within the UK, but we see it around the world about, where is data, and people need to understand, where does the data reside, where is it at transit, where is it when it resides in country. I think now more than ever that people are interested in control and performance. Applications have moved into all different ecosystems and cloud providers, and so if you're an end application owner, where your customer consumes your application, how they consume your application. That element is now more important than ever, and so companies are coming to internet exchanges like us to say, well, look, we want to understand the control, we want to understand how we can use your infrastructure technically to get the best performance for our customers, and I think that's really where over the years the interest in interconnectivity and IXs and data center fabrics, everything that kind of glues and helps to glue the internet together, the interest has grown, and we're seeing a much wider array of networks and application owners come to us. And so the model, I guess, before it was very much a flow down sort of value chain from the content out. Now we're seeing it, the value is more of a constellation. It's coming from all different parties, all different areas, depending on the networks and what they want to get out of interconnection.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I read the other day that somewhere around 75% of total internet traffic is video based, right? So I'm curious if you can speak to kind of the different types of traffic and which types are most well suited to peering, the different types of peering. And while we're at it, maybe we dive into kind of what are the differences between, public peering, private peering, and remote peering.
Yeah, IXs have for long said, well, that we service the kind of the long tail, which is the kind of the public peering element. And I think what we see is applications, all sorts of applications sit on our network and consume our network. Content, as we mentioned, content delivery networks will serve us because they have a great way of then pushing content to the edge to then be able to meet a lot of viable networks. But like equally, there's applications like video and voice, interactive video and voice, and especially in COVID changed the way that we all work and where we work. And
Mm,
so what we see is applications around the home office or the how to collaborate much better. These are things that also suit IXs. So I think actually IXs are there for everybody. What we tend to see is you say public peering, which is over the infrastructure, the kind of like everybody can consume. It's a single network, and everybody can consume the applications or the interconnection between partners. And we use things like root servers, which allow us to be able to do many to many connectivity and easy onboarding for BGP peering. But that provides a very low cost of entry. It means that small networks can join existing IXs and they get a rich array of different ASNs that they can connect to. A great fast return on investment because if they're buying a portal for an IX, so that public peering really buys in. And then we see the next sort of batch of needs, which is then really it starts when rather than types of networks, when you start to see high volume flows. So where you start to see two networks, particularly having high volume flows, typically they will then move to a more private peering model. One, because if they've built out their networks into similar facilities, a fiber interconnection between them is less likely to fail, but it's also means it's secure, it's predictable, and they can plan around that. The IX is the kind of like the next step up. It's secure. It's trusted. It has high availability. LINX prides itself on our technical availability. So you start to see networks then as the flows increase, they start to peel some of the traffic comes off of the IX and then goes on to what's private interconnect and then they start to connect with each other. And they might even embed caching systems or content distribution systems into each other's network to also help with that. So that's kind of like a next step in evolution. As far as remote peering is concerned, what we've tended to see is networks, content networks, and access networks will build out and they'll meet each other at different locations. But there are definitely areas geographically where these networks will not build out. And so what you'll tend to find is we'll work with a partner which will long line a particular network into a hub like London or Frankfurt or Amsterdam where they can pick up lots of networks on an internet exchange, and then they'll bring them in. Then the danger with that is if you're peering, you don't know whether they're 10 milliseconds away or they're 100 milliseconds away, and so there's a bit of friction in the ecosystem around okay, localized peering. That's what IXs do, but then we're bringing in remote parties. But we tend to see it as a startup type thing. So networks will say, well, look, I'm going to use a partner to remote peer into links. I'm going to get some value out of that. And then as I start to evolve and bring in more traffic over my network and interest, then typically they'll build into that geography and then they become either a private peer or public peer, depending on their business model. And they could quite easily work with us on both models going forward. So yeah, there's sort of three real models there, and they don't we see networks and companies evolve over time. They don't have a one set rule. They'll use a little bit of private and public, and we see people start remote and come local. It kind of changes over time depending on how their business grows and their customer needs grow.
That's great. No, I was just going to ask if these can be used in tandem with each other, or is it a mix, or is it that maturity level? But you kind of answered that. Um, Very interesting though, how how complex it can get so quickly, based on your traffic growth, the types of traffic, what the destinations of that traffic, as well as the origins, of course. I imagine there's also use cases where the traffic must stay local, right? Data sovereignty has become a continuous need for certain industries, especially.
Yeah, absolutely. It really comes down to your business model at the end of the day. Do you need to have that sovereignty need? And we see customers. We've had some financial networks come to us where they've said, "Hey, look, you've got networks coming up from the African continent that connect into links. If we come and peer with you in London, we can get access to all of those ISPs that are bringing their networks up from Africa, and that then gives a better performance for those applications that are needing to run down into those customers in those African nation countries.
Correct me if I'm wrong here. The London Inter Exchange is the largest not-for-profit internet exchange in the world.
Yeah, we're mutually owned. I mean, we are 100% membership, and we
Hmm.
are non for profit. If we do make a profit, we aim to make sure we're healthy and we survive, so we
Hmm.
can carry on providing great services. Any kind of surplus funds is fed back into improving, either reducing prices or improving the quality that we deliver for our members. But yeah, we are 100% membership owned organization, and we are the largest mutual membership, fully membership owned IXP around the world. And there's others that follow our model. There's a few that have evolved over time, but yeah, absolutely we
Hmm.
are.
That's amazing. No, and it is not it is a capital intensive business with all the equipment, all the maintenance. People,
Yeah.
I think, don't realize just how much goes into running, not just setting up, but running an IX.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so the next question I wanted to ask was about, whether or not traditional peering is still valuable in a world of CDNs, hyperscalers, and cloud interconnects dominating a lot of the traffic.
We do see challenges around the role the CDNs and hyperscalers have, and how that push and pulls with the IX. I mean, generally, CDN networks and hyperscalers are big supporters of IXs because of the tradition and the fact that we bring the small sort of aggregate, almost the smaller networks in to give them access to them. And I
So
think
it's
I
a bit
think
of
that
a co-opetition situation where they
absolutely, and
both
I think
benefit from and are on the receiving end.
Exactly. But what we also see is, I mean, like every business, they're under pressure themselves around the cost dynamics and where they
Hmm.
put their breakout points, where caches are embedded and what they invest. So we are seeing a bit of an evolution around that, about where and how quickly they build out, and their strategy around building out. So the big capital centers are always going to be of interest to them, and then there's a mixture of emerging markets that are mature and have reached the point of saturation, and other markets that are growing, and you can guess around sort of Middle East and African markets. These ones we're still seeing the push-pull dynamics of where to build and how to build, how quickly to build. But as I think mentioned before, with the partnerships, it really then does. We as a membership organization, we have a very open, transparent dialogue, and we like to plan. Ultimately, we have the same interest at heart. We want to make sure that the end consumer has the best experience over the internet, over our infrastructure, and that we can give them the lowest latency. And we see that across the world. I mean, we've had customers. I think I mentioned or met a member of LINX. Where really around the financial networks, where they come to us and they say, well, look, how do we unlock the potential here? We've got a customer that's in a particular country. It might be going across 10 or 12 different autonomous systems. When they do a trace of how their end user is consuming their application, and they can work out that, given that the end user's experience, and you can imagine if you're going across 12 networks across three continents, what that end user experience from a network point of view is going to be poor. So we have planning sessions with our customers, with our members, that come on board, and then they look at it and say, well, okay, well, look, if I come and join here in this hub, we can connect you at one hop away from where their ISP router is. We know what rack it's in. It's a 100 gig, 400 gig fiber cross connect away from our IXP, and we can then work out, what's the difference in the autonomous system hop count, what's the difference in the round trip delay, what's the difference. I mean, you can't cheat, physics of how
Hmm.
far the consumer is away from the application, but you can certainly improve the hop count, and obviously all the buffering, all the different systems that it goes through, and obviously that then allows us to plan a better experience.
Absolutely. No, yeah, you bring up a couple of really interesting points. Like, it's amazing what you can find with a trace route, how
Yes, yeah,
illuminating that can
absolutely.
be, right? And also just, that we have often gotten this pushback, all telcos do, right, about, hey, can we lower the latency? But I mean, as you know, latency is primarily a function of distance, right? And the speed of light is the speed of light. Can't Technology
But
is
you want it
amazing,
to
but
be
I
on the
don't think
optimum path. That's the thing. You don't want it to be going, the
exactly.
wrong way around the globe or something through different networks. So
Yeah, there are things we can do,
there's
but
things we can do. Yeah.
yeah, the speed of light is not something we can overcome yet. And yeah, it's such a, I mean, it's a benevolent ecosystem in the sense that, like, there's so many beneficiaries all trying to work together, but still, even with everyone having that intent, the outcome, I guess my point is, it's very hard for any service provider to actually get to 100% uptime
Yes, of
because of
course.
that complexity. But yeah. That's actually not a bad segue into the next question I wanted to ask, and that is around the role of automation,
Yeah.
and software-defined networking, and what roles did those play in modern peering strategies?
Yeah, I mean both in the kind of the internal and the external. I mean, I can talk a little bit about both of them. I mean, both of them are massive considerations for us. I mean, if we look, when you talk about resiliency and points of failure, we want to make the peering ecosystem as programmable as possible. We've always said, well, links and IXs are part of the ecosystem, the solution, and we're not the only path that networks and providers will take. And so, it's a question of switching, and then if there's a failure, or there's congestion, or there's a non-optimal path, then the end user application can switch around us, or switch past us, or switch on to us, depending on what's going on. And I think that's always been the case, but it's been fairly, it's been based on BGP principles. It's been based on reconvergence of routes. And I think as automation and programmability has evolved, and we've seen it. We've worked with competitors, AM6D, competitors come partners, like for like IXs. We worked on a kind of a peering API, which is an open schema that we've published that enables external parties to consume that API to program peering services. And we hope, I mean, I've been a keen supporter of this. I hope that that gives any end network if they want to choose to do it that way, they can consume through our portal, but through the API. And I think as more and more automation starts to get embedded into end networks, that will be key that we do have that ability so that we can be programmed to be used and to be part of the solution or bypass depending on the disruption or the congestion or what's going on in the network. Wherever you deploy a network, if you can make it as light touch, zero touch as possible from an internal point of view, all the better because it's self-healing, it's end user controlled, it's self-consuming, and then you start to link it into things like your billing system, your maintenance system,
Mm.
your notification system. So as things, you do a maintenance on your network, that all propagates through your customer database, your user database, and it all glues together. So automation for us is a way of making sure we can continue to operate at cost value. We can maintain high quality service uptime. We can monitor our equipment 100% of the time. We're not guessing at what's happening. We have that visibility. So, and I don't think that's just the LINX thing. That's every network is
Yeah,
evolving out.
no, infrastructure as code continues to grow. There's more and more demand for that, and I mean, the perspective I see is that the overlap in skill set between network engineers and software engineers continues to grow.
Oh,
Network
absolutely.
engineers learning Python and other coding languages and methodologies, and software engineers learning more about how networks actually work and how cloud works and how infrastructure in general works.
Absolutely, and I think as I mean we're starting to look into and explore, and I'm sure many companies are, is well how we've got a rich database of login information, Prometheus time series database information, as well as investments in generative AI around the large language models, and saying, well, look, how do we now start to take that? Around we class it as smart ops, but it's pretty much how do we do that kind of RAG, the retrieval augmentation type part of generative AI to say, well, look, we've got this rich history of all of our tickets, all of our knowledge database. We've got this peering infrastructure with all of the routing information, and also, we're taking sort of LLMs to then say, well, how do we create new ways of working that is it's automation, but it's also enhanced with these new type of toolings. And I think we're going to see that across the industry, and you'll have machines making decisions on rerouting decisions and infrastructure choice decisions, and coming back to the programmability and automation of IXs. It's just the way that we need to develop.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think you guys are using tools like, Prometheus and Elastic as well as OTS in there
Yeah.
for observability, operational, more of that day two insight.
Yeah, and we want to be able to take that. So for a long time, we've been sort of storing and not just using it to alert, but and to provide a great monitoring system. We do have a great team that look after the 24/7 operations, but absorbing all of that data into an event, and also time series database into a data lake, and then saying, well, how do we now use that as a way of taking contextually aware AI, and
Mhm.
and then really then start saying, well, look, I think our challenge has always been peering has been quite niche. So you go to a tooling partner or an open source model, and you say, well, look, I'm IT, I'm infrastructure, and I've got this need. But then you get into the niche part of peering, which is quite specific to our industry, and those that are involved will appreciate that. But then you start to look at the contextual aware generative AI, and saying, well, look, how can we then train that based on the more niche elements of our infrastructure? And I think you can start to get some really interesting outcomes from that. And that's
Mhm.
where I think we're now putting some of our research and development time into, because we think, next, certainly I do, next 2 to 5 years, we've got to go down that route to make sure we maintain a healthy, relevant network infrastructure for everybody.
Yeah, so the next question I wanted to check in on or is around how engineers can measure the effectiveness and the ROI of peering.
Yeah, I guess the ROI is I think it touched on it with the financial network that came to us to look at, they had an end user that was, 12 autonomous system hops away, and it was like, well, the actual return on investment is well, what does it mean to your business? If you're going to you're going to choose to go into peering and connect to an IX and go through that technical onboarding, what is it that you measure that then says, yeah, we were successful? And as you said, as part of the introduction, is sometimes explaining up the business about that value and the return on investment of that leap of faith can be quite tricky. And there's the technical matters. We spoke about a few of them. So you've
Mhm.
got, latency. You should improve your latency if you can work out where your peers are, where your networks are, and if you compare a number of IXs, links, and other ones across the world, you can work out, well, I can optimize my traffic flow. So you have latency improvements, you have path control, you have, loading and traffic balancing. Hopefully those three things combined together means you've got stability. And if you program your network well, and you can program your network to choose between different IXs or transit IX or direct fiber interconnects, then you start to get that stability, the control, and you have those metrics. But still, you can say to the business, we're healthier, but it's very difficult to then translate that qualitative assessment of life into quantitative. But we still measure cost per megabit, gigabit of traffic. We still look at, well, how long was my network down? How long did it take me to recover my network? So that kind of mean time to recovery. And of course, hopefully these networks are monitoring their end customer satisfaction from a technical point of view. Are their applications up? Did they lose business? Did they reroute over the infrastructure? So I think there's no simple answer to that now. I mean, I think if you're a network planner, you're a network engineer, and you're providing a service internally to your business, and you're making a decision between transit, peering, interconnect, going into a data center, connecting to different hubs around the world. It's a very tricky. It's not one rule fits all. It's a very tricky, complex world, and it ultimately comes back to is, well, what is it you want to deliver for your customers, your business, and what's the value to you? Is it uptime? Is it cost reduction? Is it latency? Is it best user experience? The real-time gaming industry is at one end of the spectrum compared to maybe a push and distribute content type network. There's very different needs on that. So and that's what makes our lives interesting. It's what's really great when we get to these conferences and we talk with different consumers, different networks, different members of LINX, or hopefully new members that might join. That's where we talk to them about, well, what is the value? What is it you can get back for your business? We need to understand what your business really is, the drivers, and then we can talk to you about how you might utilize our infrastructure to best meet that.
Yeah, no, and over the past few years, I mean, where applications or workloads actually live I think has changed. Edge continues to be a topic of interest, right? It's such a nebulous term, where is the edge for you? But no, the fact of the matter is that if an application lives at the edge versus some centralized private DC, that creates a very different use case for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and edge and where the edge is and investment in pushing to the edges. Yeah, I mean that's probably been a hot discussion point over the last 5 years for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I don't know, you do peering, 100% peering all the time, everywhere. So, like, based on your opinion, what do you see on the horizon for peering? What's coming down the pike, so to speak?
Well, yeah, I think you touched on it there with the edge. We
Hmm.
do see more applications getting pushed further to the edge. I mean, at some point, we were talking about, are there going to be, 50 new edge pops in the UK, 500 in Europe, where is the sweet spot? I think, it comes back to, what is the application? What is the round trip delay needed from where and what's the architecture? So if you look at some of the 5G mobile networks and how slicing architecture for them has evolved, if we look at the gaming or the smart city autonomous vehicle networks, how has that evolved and where do we need to build that infrastructure? So I don't think that's fully matured yet as far as exactly how that push pull of, what compute applications do you need to push and which ones can you keep centralized? There is obviously an investment. If you're going to push compute further out, there is an investment from that company to push it out. We can be an enabler to help with that interconnectivity. But ultimately, they need to get return on their investment as far as, I put this application, it cost me X 100,000 to put this in. How do I then, get that back? So I think edge peering and how that evolves, and we see that is happening. Technologies around, remote peering, which we spoke about, and small site build outs, satellite hubs, all these sort of things have come up, and I think we're still seeing how that develops. Sovereign, we are hearing more and more. We in the UK, we've had a telecom security act that's impacted on some networks that provide critical infrastructure for the UK on how we should operate, and we see that same dialogue happening in the European Union and other jurisdictions around the world. So I think sovereign focused data stores and interconnectivity around that of what an IX can provide and peering and interconnection. That's definitely an area that we're keenly following. I think that's not going to die away. And of course, AI. We spoke a little bit about AI
Hmm.
from an end consumer point. We're all experimenting with LLMs and if you're a Microsoft customer, you've probably got Copilot enabled, all these sort of things. But actually, we've also got lots of data that's being pushed around. So data mobility for AI is a key thing. And actually, yes, the very high the training models that are being trained are being done in private pods in high performance computing pods within private data centers. But then when you start to look at lots of enterprise telemetry type data, or if you're looking at inference models and distributed models, you start to look at, well, what is the data mobility model that we need to do as a overall ecosystem to enable as AI evolves. And again, I don't think any of us really understand how that's fully going to evolve. So from an IX point of view, we're very comfortable with building big networks that can, move traffic seamlessly very, very quickly. So we definitely want to be following that and be involved in that because we think we've got a trusted high performance reputation there, and I think we can work with partners around that. I think the other area that might evolve, we started to see a little bit with some digital investment in the European Union before the UK exited, but we're still seeing the need for federated IXs, so the interconnection of IXs. So you might have the some IXs are building into different geographies, but you might need to have two IXs, three IXs work together to make sure that they can interconnect, which
Yeah.
goes back to why we started to build the IX APIs. Because look, we don't need to build into every IX. If I can consume peering services in Frankfurt, I don't need to build into Frankfurt. I can just program, DKIX's platform to consume peering services and like for the UK. So I think federated and consumption of digital consumption of peering is definitely going to be an area to go into. So I think those,
Hmm.
from edge and sovereign and AI data and federation, those are I guess the four areas that we're following that I'm interested in following over the next few years.
That is very interesting. Thank you for sharing about that. I mean, it's on the AI point, it's not one bucket, isn't it? It's like the bucket for training an LLM or any kind of model is, you can measure that in exabytes depending on the data set. But with just like we talked about before, the different traffic profiles, a video would be measured in typically gigabytes, right? Depending on how long you're streaming. But then an AI query can be measured in kilobytes. So
Absolutely.
again, very different traffic profiles, different capacity needs, but you kind of have to be ready for the full gamut.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. So, um, kind of coming to the end of our time here, I think the last part I wanted to just go a little bit deeper on, um, is just how these different models we touched on defining at the beginning the paid peering, hybrid peering, and peering as a service. How are those changing the landscape in your view?
Yeah, a paid peering is sort of settlement free or, connectivity, mutually exchanged peering contracts have always existed. We'll continue to see that push pull. I mean, there's been a bit of political positioning around sort of who should pay for infrastructure. You have a content network that's pushing traffic over a telecoms network, and as we all watch and consume content, and we subscribe to services that don't necessarily immediately flow to the network that the ISP network that's building out for you. So there is this tension around within the industry around sort of who should pay for capacity and build out. And so I think we'll continue to see that. But from a technical, the politics aside, I mean, from a technical point of view, from an IX's point of view, with it, we offer the platform like a high speed freeway, motorway type thing where we offer it. We really, it's up to the participants on the platform to work out how they exchange and what sort of policies that they have in place with each other to exchange. We do know networks will set up in facilities we're in for private peering, as we said earlier, as well as public peering. I think there will be a push towards paid peering for certain networks. We see, as things, complexity increases, and you have this idea of a long tail. Some of the ISPs, some of the content, some of the hyperscalers don't have the resources to be able to cover all that. So they do want to look
Mm,
at IXPs have been the long tail, or they want to look at aggregators, or they want to look at people that can pull together those end customers and present something that they can be managed for them. So I think that might be where you'll start to see some networks saying, well, look, these particular class of networks, I'm going to peer with them privately, and for these other ones, I'm going to use this infrastructure, and they're going to have to pay to connect to us. And I think that is being discussed within the industry. From a technical point of view, LINX can support either model, and I think it'd be interesting to see how that evolves from the big networks working out how their cost model ultimately evolves over time, and how we IXs can stay relevant. But then, as far as that sort of leads into, I think, hybrid peering, where you've got that mixture of, you join an IX, you do a bit of public peering, you do a bit of, paid for private peering on a kind of a side point-to-point connectivity. I think that's going to be around for a long time. I think you might see a few more networks that transition from completely open to a hybrid type model, really based on their own end needs. But
hmm
yeah, technically will support both. And I think the interesting one there is then sort of more in, going back to the kind of automation and peering as a service. We're all, from an IX point of view, we're seeing different networks that we spoke about earlier, is more companies are getting interested in IXs. They want to understand, if my application is here and my customer is there, and we've got all of these moving components, how does it actually work? How does how does the customer experience their customers experience them? And then they said, well, look, if we can get into peering, how do we make that leap of faith? Well, one of the ways is you can go and have a peering as a service where you almost have it packaged. And I'm not quite sure, is that something LINX will do or other IXs will do? Is it where you partner with somebody, or you work with a managed service provider? But whatever, anything as a service, there's people that are really good at that. Now, the other side of it is, with all of the AI and automation is, well, do some of those complexities about making that step where you might want to have peering as a service, if you have automation and you have tooling that can actually take some of that away, how much of a step is that? And I think that's probably the area. The peering as a service is one that's probably the interested one. Is, are we gonna see really more people join IXs because they can find it easier because there's a as a service type offering, or can join us because there's more tooling that is open and available, open sourced, and people can make that step a little easier. And I think, I haven't got an answer to that. I mean, I think we're really looking at that peering as a service and working, well, how do we partner with people? How do we make sure IX is attractive to networks to join us? We think they'll get a benefit out of coming on our infrastructure of consuming other peering services, other interconnection services. So we welcome more people to LINX, and I'm sure other IXs do as well.
Hmm. No, it sounds like that peering as a service model is sort of an entry point, sort of the Toyota Corolla of of IXs in some ways. And I mean, I think every network. Last time I checked, there's like over 77,000 ASs in the world. But like every network would probably just love to do settlement-free peering. Like you said, not every network is eligible for that sort of thing. There's imbalances in scale, there's asymmetry, and just overall expectations of what the service is going to provide. Looking towards the future, the real challenge, isn't necessarily whether the peering is worth it, but how to peer in a way that aligns with your traffic patterns and your
Absolutely.
goals, right? Any final thoughts for us as we wrap up?
I'm, very encouraged by the development in the tools, the IX API, the programmability. I think networks that might have been thinking, well, can I join? Can I peer? What does it mean for me to have an AS, and what do I need to do as a business? How do I communicate that? I think, our job, and I think it's been getting easier, is, how do we make sure that we communicate that effectively so people can see the value, what we started the conversation is. And I think that's becoming clearer. I think we can communicate much better. And I think the tools are developing. There's still a gap. There's still that little, you say, that leap of faith. It's like, well, do we need to upskill? Do we need to invest? Do we, software network engineers, how do they work together? But that is changing. And I think, the final thoughts is, next 1 2 years, especially with the advances in AI tooling, I think there's going to be a lot of new entrances onto IXs, and a lot of new challenges, but interesting challenges for people like me. So no, I welcome it, and it's great to have a chance to talk through today on some of
Yeah,
the
these have
topics.
been great insights. Thank you so much for joining us, Richard.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks, Trent.